Now, time for the football show.
The Football Show on Off the Ball.
With Sky. All the football you love in one place. Across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then. What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
Now you're welcome along to the football show. Later on, Dion Fanning will join us to chat all things Champions League and beyond. Latest in Madrid, 0-0 on the night, 1-0 of course to Manchester City on aggregate, so very finely balanced, 52 minutes on the clock. Phil Foden going around with a Terry Butcher style head bandage, so he's been roughed up is the general assessment from afar in this game, but still looking for the breakthrough. Man City just to calm nerves a touch and put this game beyond Atletico. Gundogan did hit the upright in the first half, and City have had the majority of possession, as you might expect, but no breakthrough yet on the night. Meanwhile, at Anfield, things more comfortable for Liverpool, as you might expect. They are 4-2 up on aggregate, so 1-1 on the night. Canate opened the scoring for Liverpool. Benfica have equalised, but there's a 2-goal cushion there for Liverpool. Much changed. Jurgen Klopp obviously bemoaning pre-match the fixture pile-up for Liverpool. So he has gone with a midfield three, for instance, of Milner and Henderson and Keita. A front three of Diaz, Firmino and Jota. No Van Dijk in the centre of defence either. No Trent Alexander-Arnold. It's Gomez, Joel Matip, Canate, Tsimikas as their back four. He was also bemoaning the fact that after their first leg semi-final against Villarreal, their Premier League game is going to be 12:30, Newcastle away, lunchtime kickoff Saturday, and called out BT Sport again. So already earmarking the Des Kelly Jurgen Klopp tussle post-match in that game. That is where we are then, the Champions League this evening thus far. Very happy to say we are joined by Nick Miller of The Athletic, who is on the line. Hey Nick.
Hello, how you doing?
Yeah, very well. Great to have you with us. So the papers today awash with reports of Erik Ten Hag agreeing a 3-year deal with Manchester United. Manchester United do have the option of a 4th year if they so wish. It was reported initially that much of this week was about Ten Hag looking for assurances on the powers he would have, the control he would have. It seems that, according to, for instance, Jason Burt here, that wasn't quite the case, that he's far more amenable, for instance, to having a director of football with him. He never demanded, it seems, full control on transfers. So it seems like conversations were maybe less stressful than we might have at first thought. You have written a piece, The Education of Erik Ten Hag, which gives us a great insight into the man himself and where he has come from. How familiar were you with Ten Hag's background before the piece, Nick?
Not a huge amount about him before he took over at Ajax. I obviously knew him primarily from that incredible Champions League run in 2019. And I knew that he'd obviously basically had to rebuild the Ajax team after that to win the league. Well, probably win the league last season, probably going to win the league this season as well. But I was kind of vaguely aware that he'd worked at Bayern Munich at some point, but I didn't really know a huge amount about his career before that. I knew he wasn't a particularly famous player, but I didn't realise things like he was actually Steve McLaren's assistant at FC20, and that's kind of you would think that a junior coach like him would have learned, would be the one learning from the senior man who'd obviously not terribly successfully, but who had managed internationally before. But from talking to McLaren himself, it sounds like it was very much the other way around, that it was Ten Hag who was doing the educating as opposed to McLaren.
McLaren was absolutely effusive. We'll come back to the earlier part of Ten Hag's life, but seeing as you mentioned McLaren, his comments effusive when it came to Ten Hag's football acumen. So according to your piece here, McLaren said of Ten Hag, without a shadow of a doubt, that he would not just be an excellent number 2, but a fantastic number 1 at some point. That was his impression of Ten Hag when he was working under him. He could see things in the game that nobody else could see, said Steve McLaren, myself included. I have to sit up in the stands to see the patterns of a game, but Erik could stand on the touchline and see them. He always knew the answer to everything, how to change shape, change positions. His adjustments in the games, and obviously I had worked with Sir Alex Ferguson, And I used to think that sometimes some of his subs and changes were strange, but they always worked. Erik is the same in that respect. So McLaren here is painting Ten Hag as a kind of savant.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I obviously expected him to be kind of broadly positive about Ten Hag. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't have agreed to talk to me about it.
Yeah.
But, I was slightly taken aback with just how effusive he was. I mean, he didn't quite, because Ten Hag was only with McLaren for one season at Twente, and that wasn't the season that they won the Eredivisie. He left after the first season of McLaren, but McLaren didn't quite give Ten Hag all the credit for winning the league title that he wasn't even there for. But he was getting pretty close to it. He gave the impression that Ten Hag in that first season sort of ran the show, and McLaren was just there to kind of make the big calls and do big smiles for the media and handle all the press duties and so on. So yeah, I mean, it's while I was talking to him, the more cynical part of my brain was thinking, you're being very effusive about him. Are you angling for a little job here, Steve? Are you? I'm not sure. It doesn't seem like at the moment it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case, but that's kind of the impression that I got.
McLaren slams Ten Hag would have been an interesting piece as well, yeah. So, yeah, well, it really jumped out. By the way, as an aside, it made me think, when McLaren is talking here about how, well, I can only really spot patterns in a game, and lots of us can only spot patterns in a game when we have that slightly higher view from the stands. It did make me think, why are you not all watching the games from high up in the stands, if that's the case? Like, Ten Hag can actually see the patterns from touchline, so that jumped out to me as well as interesting.
Yeah. It's like, what are you? The touchline stuff always feels very performative anyway. It's just like, you've got to stay down there to be immediate and be close to the players and shout things that they have no possible chance of hearing, and maybe argue with the opposition coach a little bit more. But yeah, I'm always slightly baffled as to why managers don't sit up in the stands a lot more. Sam Allardyce used to do it famously, and you can say an awful lot about Sam Allardyce. He wasn't scared of doing things that other managers wouldn't. So yeah, it is a bit of an odd one.
So tell us a little bit about Ten Hag, the player, and the initial years in football.
Well, he was a sort of fairly modest player. He had a sort of, a very good Eredivisie career. He never played for the Netherlands. He was a kind of defender, sometimes played in midfield. He had 3 spells at FC Twente, which was his local club. And then he retired when he was only 32. And I obviously didn't get the chance to speak to him to ask him the exact reasons for his retirement, but the impression I got from speaking to people and reading stuff that had previously been written about him is that he essentially retired because he didn't really think he had anything else left to prove or anything else left to learn. And the other impression that I got was that he was one of those players who was sort of only really playing to prepare himself for being a coach. It felt like that it was always what he wanted to do rather than just be a player. I spoke to people who have known him for a very long time and who knew him as a kid and played with him throughout his youth career. And they always say he would always think very deeply about the game, and he would always kind of be the first to ask questions about the coach if they'd made a decision that he didn't quite agree with, and to the point of irritation to a lot of these coaches. One of them did actually sort of ban him for a couple of games because he was basically chipping off slightly too much at the coach, and it would be quite frequent that a coach would have to say, yeah, "All right, Erik, just I'm in charge. You just pipe down for a bit, will you?" And yeah, he grew up in Haaksbergen, which is a small town near Enschede, which is where Twente is based. His family owns one of the kind of probably the biggest sort of estate agent / financial services industry in the region. So the family weren't short of a few quid. and he didn't need to go into football. And in fact, his family weren't particularly keen on him going to football. I think they would have rather have he'd gone into the family business with his two brothers. But the thing that, and they would say this, wouldn't they? But all the people who knew him were very keen to say that while the family had money, he wasn't spoiled. He always had to work for everything. But yeah, I kind of wondered whether that sort of fed into why he wanted to be a coach as well. He got the impression that his family was slightly disapproving of the idea of him actually playing football, but something a little bit more, cerebral, like being a coach, might have been a little bit more acceptable to them.
So tell us then about his first forays into coaching.
Yeah, so he started out coaching at Twente. He stayed there for about, I think he was 8 or 9 years all told, and worked his way up through the ranks. His sort of coaching mentor was Fred Rutten, who was kind of Dutch coaching stalwart from the 90s and 2000s. He worked under him quite a lot at Twente, and then when McLaren came, he was the kind of obvious choice to be his assistant. He then left Twente in, let's get the dates right, 2009, I think, to go and work as Fred Rutten's assistant, who was at PSV at that time. Then after a couple of years there, he went to Go Ahead Eagles, who at that time were in the Dutch second division. They hadn't been in the top tier for 16 or 17 years, and he got them promoted in his first season there. And the kind of, at that point, the sort of natural move you would have thought was either to stay with Go Ahead Eagles and kind of build on the success he'd already had there, maybe go to a slightly bigger Dutch team. McLaren said he expected him to kind of go to someone like Groningen or Heerenveen, or back to Twente, where he probably would have got the number one job at some point. But instead, he went to coach the Bayern Munich second team, which was partly, I think, motivated by his. He's always made most of his coaching decisions, and whether Manchester United falls into this remains to be seen, very kind of sensibly and shrewdly, and it's all about what will make him a better coach, what will educate him more, rather than what will kind of further his career in a more kind of obvious way.
It is a very interesting move. So as you say, most coaches, if they're to have a rise in the game, they need that Go Ahead Eagles type moment where they get unfashionable club which has never been promoted, and that marks everybody's card and earmarks them for future greatness. And as you say, at that point you would rightly think, well, bigger job in the Eredivisie is the sensible move and the natural move. At Munich, to what extent did he have exposure to Guardiola, for instance, or what do we know of his time in Munich? Because this does seem to be discussed and pointed to as very formative.
Yeah, I think that was one of the key reasons that he went there, to learn from Guardiola. I think that they worked together to some extent, but they're quite sort of separate jobs. They're not quite completely different. Two clubs within a club kind of thing. But he was very much left to, because they were playing in the German third or fourth tier, so it's sort of it's obviously a very competitive level of football, and so he was, I think, broadly left to run the team as he pleased. But obviously he would pick Guardiola's brain about some things he's talked in the past about, the things he learned from Guardiola, and it's interesting that he, then speaking to people who he coached after his spell at Munich, they would talk about the kind of similarities between the two, in terms of personality more than necessarily in terms of style of football. So, both essentially control freaks. They both quite intense characters, both very, very detailed in terms of their planning, which I think he was like before he went to Bayern, but those couple of years he spent there really kind of enhanced and added to the qualities he already had.
Yeah, there were some really interesting comments. For instance, if you stay with the Munich experience for a time, Stefan Buck, veteran defender, played for the Bayern reserve team that season under Ten Hag. He said it was a little bit different to what we had done before. It was new for us to focus on a 2-metre pass, for example. He would tell us we had to be stronger. We would look at him and say, what do you want from me? It's just a 2-metre pass. But he would say, you have to play stronger and faster. We have to have precision. In the beginning, it was difficult for us to understand these things because we had never focused on 2-metre passes before. But with time, we knew that his way would be successful. And after he left, we understood more about his way of coaching. And he also gave a nice insight into Ten Hag's man management and his personality. His focus was also to be a gentleman. He didn't lose his temper on the pitch. He always had perspective. When he was angry, he would never show it to the team or the referee. You would always see that he rose above the problem. So that hints at the attention to detail, the focus on something like a 2-metre pass. And there are other examples of the attention to detail. Even at training, all the players have to wear the same socks. I mean, in some respects, you wonder what that has to do with anything. But I guess he's got his reasons, and maybe it's about setting a standard. And there was another story about a training session where he explained that different coloured bibs should be placed in separate piles rather than all chucked in together. Again, you wonder in the grand scheme of things. These are exactly the kind of things, Nick, that if this doesn't work out in 2 to 3 years' time and you're doing the post-mortem piece on what went wrong at Old Trafford, there will be an anonymous player saying, he was weird. He asked us to put our bibs in different piles and made sure we had to all wear the same socks. We found this a bit daft. The victors write history and all that.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to make exactly that point. You're always slightly wary of presenting those things as proof of this guy's genius, but they are. I think that they're just examples of his attention to detail, and very often, those things don't matter at all. But it was just this kind of illustration of how well he prepares things. I was kind of reminded of the thing that Marcelo Bielsa said a few years ago when I think it was around the time when they got caught spying on Derby's training. And he then gave a sort of punishingly long press conference where he explained exactly why they do this kind of thing. Yeah. And at the end of this, he kind of conceded, I over-prepare. It's almost certainly a waste of time, but it kind of makes me feel better. And I was sort of reminded of that when I was hearing all these kind of stories about Ten Hag's sort of incredible attention to detail on things that, as you say, probably don't matter in themselves, but are indicative of kind of wider attitude. Yeah.
Any other examples of attention to detail that struck you?
I mean, just going back to McLaren, he would. McLaren told a story about how McLaren kind of arrived, agreed all his contract, did the introductory press conference, and didn't. It was that he would pre-season training was starting the next day, but he didn't have anything lined up. So he went to Ten Hag and said, have you got any sessions that you can put on? And Ten Hag pulled out this folder with 6 weeks worth of meticulously planned coaching exercises and drills and everything down to sort of water breaks and what he thought the players should be eating for their meals in that time as well. And it was just like, McLaren was expecting kind of the outlines of a few sessions that would kind of keep him going. Yeah. But what he got was an entire pre-season planned out to the, more or less to the minute. So that's the kind of thing that, he would have known that there was a new manager coming in, and he would have had to have done some sort of preparation, but that level of detail was just, phenomenal and very much above and beyond.
Yeah. There's a quote of March 2019, the flight back from Madrid after their 4-1 win, the famous Ajax 4-1 win, and naturally everybody on the flight is ecstatic and celebratory, and Ten Hag is watching clips of Fortuna Sittard, their weekend opponents, and an anonymous player said, sometimes you think enjoy it more. And still, look, Ten Hag is a workaholic. These guys are all workaholics. That is one of the things they have in common. Do you know what's kind of interesting though? Because even take the managers in action this evening that we're all very aware of, Simeone, Pep, Klopp, they have this very striking charisma, of different kinds of charisma, very striking authority, forces of personality in their own way. If they walked into a room you or I were in, Nick, I suspect we would notice, and that was long before they were managers of Atletico and Manchester City and Liverpool. They just have a certain something about them. What's very striking about Ten Hag is people are at pains to point out that he doesn't really have that kind of quality, or certainly he's had to improve in that area. And so examples would include last year when supposedly he interviewed for the Spurs job, it was felt there was a lack of charisma or a lack of communication skills. And your piece hints at it as well. So I thought this was really interesting. Goes to Munich for these few years, comes back and is the Utrecht manager. And Robin Reuter, the goalkeeper at Utrecht, talks about his communication skills. So this is only 5-6 years ago. When he first came, he wasn't that good at communication. He was a bit clumsy. It's not that he couldn't communicate, but for example, in the beginning, in every sentence, he would say, he would say that like 10 times every sentence. People were distracted because once you noticed it, you couldn't hear anything else. But he has made such a good progression in terms of talking to the media. And if you look at the start of the Ajax career, he was still a bit clumsy, but he's way better in front of the camera. His communication is way better. Very interesting, very at odds with like the precision he seems to be preaching over 2-yard passes. And Simon Cooper was on last week and he mentioned the accent and the personality is not what you would associate with somebody of the super clubs. Tuchel jumps to mind as well. So be really interested for your thoughts on that area.
Yeah, that was quite interesting for kind of a few reasons. What I did, there was I think it was before Ajax's last home game. They did I think it was probably Sky Sports did a series of kind of vox pops outside the ground saying, with Ajax fans saying, are you going to be sorry to lose Ten Hag? Looks like he's going to Manchester United. Do you think he'll be a success there? And one of the guys that they spoke to said, to be a success at Manchester United, you don't need to be a coach, you need to be an ego, which I think kind of plays it is quite a common sentiment, I think. But given that Jose Mourinho and Louis van Gaal didn't really succeed at Manchester United, I can't really think of two bigger egos in football management. So I don't think that in that respect that it will matter hugely. What I think will matter is, I don't know how many times I can't remember how many times I mentioned this in the piece because it got a little bit repetitive, but one of the things that kept coming up was along the same lines as the communication thing that you just mentioned. Most of the jobs he did, for the first 3 months or 3-4 months, the players wouldn't be kind of that impressed. They would think, well, this guy's a bit strange. He does, as you say, doesn't communicate particularly well with the media. He's not a kind of huge personality. He has these kind of weird foibles where he tells us what kind of socks to wear. But after a while, they would realise that his methods were working, and if they weren't winning, they could see the progression in terms of their performances or their style of play. And all the while these succession of different people were telling me, well, the first impression wasn't amazing, and we all thought it was a bit weird for the first 3 months. I just kept thinking, well, good luck with that at United. See how that plays out, So I don't think that his a lack of a kind of force of personality will necessarily hamper him in terms of how he copes with the demands of the job. Where it might be a problem is convincing the players, these players who, we all know, we've all heard the kind of stories that have come out of the dressing room at various points over the last few years about their various dissatisfactions with different managers and their methods. If excuse me, if he can't get those players on board quite early on, then, he might have a few problems.
Going to be very interesting. I really enjoyed the piece, Nick. People can check it out on The Athletic. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers. Nick Miller there, who wrote that piece on The Athletic. The Education of Erik Ten Hag is what it's called, and it's on The Athletic. Mick McCarthy's pop back in. Hello.
Hello, Joe. If Manchester City concede in the next 15 minutes and somehow then in extra time or before that go out of the Champions League, which isn't a certainty. They're still winning 1-0 on aggregate at Atletico Madrid, then Pep Guardiola will have had his mad Pep moment. It's easy for me to say. He took off Kevin De Bruyne after 65 minutes for Raheem Sterling, the only sub they'd made at the time, and people erupted. It was time to change things, Pep, but not De Bruyne, not that Bruyne. What are you doing? He takes off one of the best players in the world. Since then, Atletico have looked dangerous, not necessarily because of that, but City do seem to be a little bit edgy, I would say. And Atletico haven't created a huge amount, but they've shown that they're able to cut through City a little bit with some pretty brilliant quick passing movements. So this is far from over. I wouldn't say it's likely that they score, but it's definitely not. It's definitely not out of the realms of possibility. Kyle Walker went off as well with what looked at the time maybe like a slightly serious injury, but he's kind of limping off on the sideline there. I just saw him a minute ago. He didn't seem too bad, but Nathan Ake has come on for him.
Dynamic of this game now shifts for these next 15 minutes because Atletico get desperate. They're going to push, and they've lots of brilliant attacking players.
Yeah.
And Man City will get very, very edgy. And I would now, if I was a City supporter, be very worried, because I don't think just because Atletico come out and play, City are necessarily going to hammer them on the break, because they're still just brilliantly drilled defensively, Atletico. So I think the next 20 minutes of Atletico going for broke increasingly.
Yeah, it was absolutely, and they're pressing really high as well, which is making City just edgy. Like De Paula's just had his second shot to just go to the just wide in the last few minutes alone. They're appealing for a penalty here. Like Atletico are kind of all over them. It's a terrible dive, but Atletico are all over them at the moment. And yeah, as I said, edgy City. We'll see what happens. Like, they've taken off Griezmann as well, which I think is one of those things that you think, like, that's a manager who's just really in control of things and comfortable in his job and confident in himself as well. Like, Griezmann's not playing well. He's not the player he was. I don't need to leave this guy on because he's got a big reputation. I've got other players who can do the job for me, you know. So, yeah, worrying times for City. I think it's 3-2 now to, well, it sounds like a very entertaining but ultimately pointless game of football at Anfield.
It's the perfect game at Anfield. Entertaining as hell, goals going in, but Benfica still very much at bay. Konate and then Firmino twice. Liverpool's 3 goals, and Benfica have just, as I said, pulled one back to make it 3-2 on 73 minutes. But Liverpool 3 goals to the good on aggregate. So really, this game in Madrid is the interesting one. 13 minutes plus added time to go there. And our football show coverage is with thanks to Sky, proud partner of the women's national football team. Out Believe together, and we can go anywhere. Back
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch every UEFA Champions League and Europa League match live on BT Sport this season.
First, Benfica, they're making a go of it. It's 3-3 at Anfield now. Benfica have just scored a third. So a lively game. Liverpool still very comfortable, obviously, on aggregate, but 3-3.
Liverpool having to not do what reminds me of Scotty Scheffler not having to 5-putt or 6-putt on the 18th here.
What would be the equivalent?
He did 4-putt or 3-putt, so it could be close.
And still 0-0 in Madrid, and Atletico are starting to push, and City are getting that bit edgy. So the
Luis Suarez is on, Joe.
Dynamic is changing.
It's written.
Yeah. City in attack now, with Suarez on, as you said. Griezmann's off. Kevin De Bruyne's off for Sterling, but this game is now starting to go a touch end to end in Madrid with 8 minutes to go plus added time. Very happy to say Dion Fanning is with us, associate editor at The Currency. Dion, great to have you on.
Hi Joe, how are you?
Are you watching much of the game this evening?
I've been watching the game with one shot on target rather than the game with 6 goals. So
we all do.
I know.
I was reading reports of Phil Foden being roughed up, and I see him going around Terry Butcher style.
He is, yeah. No, the Atletico approach, it is kind of is extraordinary. Like, you know, now obviously the last 10 minutes it's changed a bit, but their absolute determination to play no football is it's like, you know, it is like, it's like an ideology, you know, like when there's an option of playing football and not playing football, sometimes they do actually go for the option of not playing football. It's like the way, you know, in certain places they would, in Gaelic football, they would abhor soccering, you know, somebody who might play the ball on the ground. And they'd say, like, you know, you got to get it into your hand, even though the logical thing to do might be just to pass it on the ground. And this is like it is like an ideology, you know. And watching it now, the last few minutes, look, they are opening it up a bit, but it's I think it would be better, I think, if Manchester City went through, although it would be kind of quite a thrilling shock if Atletico did it.
Yeah. Well, you join luminaries like Arrigo Sacchi and Marco van Basten, who've been very critical of Atletico since the first leg, to which Simeone said yesterday, like my dad says, the fish dies by the mouth. The fish dies by the mouth, Dion. It's a saying, talk is cheap, talk is free, everybody can talk. So Simeone does not care one bit. And it is quite striking that players like Luis Suarez, Griezmann, João Felix all pitch up into this environment. I mean, you'd think they'd be running a million miles away from it, but there's something in Simeone's force of personality, and I suppose success as well, we should state, which means they're happy to go along with it.
Yeah, but but and his personality, I think, kind of gets him off the hook a lot of the time, because you do have this huge charisma and this huge personality there that is kind of captivating, but the football is really terrible. And Atletico they're not a small club. Like, they're not, like, how much did João Felix cost them? It's not that they're not Villarreal, you know. It's
almost a chance. See, they're rather good when they go forward, deflected out for a corner. And Simeone is about the highest paid coach in world football as well.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I do feel that it kind of, because of the passion and the manner in which he goes about it.
Various tones of from you too. I like it. Almost scoring Atletico.
Yeah. What's happened there?
Ederson came from a corner, didn't get it, and at the far stick there was an Atletico leg which was inches away from tapping the ball into an empty net.
Yeah.
The original block by Stones was actually fantastic to bring it out for a corner in the first place. A real goal-saving challenge, but Ederson made a ball at the cross then afterwards. So. And
Dion, speaking of Pep, he hasn't done anything too untoward this evening?
No, he's been kept it. He kept his kept it together. De Bruyne went off after. How long? What time did De Bruyne go off? But apart from that, it hasn't been anything too crazy from Pep. He hasn't overthought it. But again, there hasn't been much happening in the game, and in a strange way, that as it goes along has possibly, it slows City down. They've no rhythm. There's nothing. Atletico's whole approach is based on getting them out of their rhythm. The way they went after Foden in the game was, there was an extraordinary moment where just that classic again. Savage at one point just giving Foden just a sort of shoulder charge, crossing over about 5 yards just to give him a bit of a shoulder charge for no reason, and that kind of stuff. Which again, why did he dummy? What the? Why did he dummy it? Why did he step over it?
Atletico are really putting it up to City here. They're having several close calls. Somebody's texting in to say, Simeone the highest paid coach in world football? ? Yes, he is. You will. Well, I mean, I wouldn't suggest reflect too closely on your own life, and I'll do similarly, but you'll be upset to hear Diego Simeone earns €40 million annually for the job he does at Atletico. So that makes him, I think by distance, the highest paid coach in football. And now a big melee, hurling style, Mick, we were talking hurling, has kicked off in the corner.
This is just something that got very entertaining, despite the one shot and goal that we all had to endure, Dion, for the first 75, 80 minutes.
There are about 15 players both sides, and then a whole bunch of people from the bench in the, as we watch it on TV, left corner, right on the corner flag, all pushing, jostling. There's a Man City player down on the ground, so clearly there was a challenge. Foden.
Okay. Foden's down, and then a sub had a go at, was it Savage?
Yes, Savage. Grealish is now reasoning with Savage, saying, "Come on, you knew that was nasty."
Somebody got their hair pulled, I think. It's everyone's. There's how many people are there? There's about
40 people involved in this thing.
People, yeah.
This wouldn't be like Atletico at all now, I have to say.
While we have a pause in this, a word on last night's football. Bayern out and Luka Modric, we genuflect before the altar.
It was phenomenal. Now I do think Chelsea will wonder how they blew it, really, because they did seem to have Real there for the taking, and to let them back into it was the way the game was going. It was there for Chelsea, and I think all the vulnerabilities in Madrid were on display, and then the things that get them out of jail. So often the players that get them out of jail, Modric, Benzema, and the pass. It really was. It was just one of those moments that when you see it, when you saw it live, you kind of go, "What was that?" And then every replay you watch, you just want to see more angles of it. It was extraordinary.
And did Chelsea hand them the initiative when they got back? When they got back into the tie, did they stop playing, or did Madrid up it, or what was your read on the game?
I think Chelsea. I think they handed them the initiative a bit. I don't think Madrid really upped it. I don't think they're capable really of upping it too much. They don't have, like, Modric can make a pass, and he got time and space to make the pass, but they're not really a side that I think can change or force the pace of a game anymore. So I think it really was something that Chelsea will look back at and think that they let them get away.
Yeah.
No, I just think it was, given where Chelsea had been recently, it was such a missed opportunity. Obviously, the Brentford game and what's happening at the club more fundamentally. I think it's something they really needed.
Felipe is in the process of being sent off, but he's refusing to leave the pitch because he thinks it's a chronically awful decision. His teammates are now just dragging him away. Peak Atletico here. Oh, he's kicked something. This is a wonderful sign-off. Simeone's nodding proudly with his arms crossed.
This is why we sit through, as Mick said, this is why we sit through the one shot on target, because we know that something like this
He's Simeone to Beckham this.
There's nothing in this. Is a complete Simeone Beckham kick. He tackles Foden fairly. Foden sort of half comes down on him, and he just gives a little kick into the back of Foden's legs. It's very David Beckham on Simeone, and that's what caused all hell to break loose. And so Felipe's been sent off, and he's disgusted walking down the tunnel.
He's also killed 2 minutes of time in injury time when his team is chasing the game. Like, he's a complete head case. Like,
yeah, jeez.
Yeah. They did have their best chance. They just had their best chance of the game as well, and now they've just spent 5 minutes brawling at the wrong end of the pitch.
Yeah, self-defeating moment, I think. One last quick one, Dion, just to reflect on the last 24 hours. For Irish football, amazing result in Sweden, 250,000 people watching on RTE. There's a real sense of, I think, capturing the sporting public, this Irish team now, as they're growing into this World Cup qualification group.
Yeah, it's a fantastic story, and it kind of demonstrates everything that can be done with kind of will and purpose, and a team that captures the imagination. And when there is a prize that people get excited about, like qualification, and everything comes together, and you see the way the team excites people, the way they're advanced, and the way they're put forward it's just a kind of it's a great story in terms of what it's done for football and for women's football, and just the audience that is there for it, and it's going to grow and grow. Like, that is the thing. It is something that's going to get bigger and bigger. And it was a fantastic result.
It sure is. We are slightly out of time. There's 9 minutes of added time here, and so there's 5-6 minutes left. So you're due about 3 more red cards and maybe a goal or two. So we'll let you go and watch that for the time being. Thanks, Dion. Appreciate it.
Thanks, lads.
Dion Fanning there of the Currency. Still 3-3 at Anfield, by the way. So Liverpool going through 6-4. And like I said, 9 minutes of added time in Madrid. Back in 1 sec.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, all the football you love in one place. Across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.